Welcome to Silent Frontier Stories. On a night when the snow fell thick and heavy, a mother walked into a storm with 5 young children, with no shelter in sight, only love and resilience. Come, Keichu, step into this story and feel the strength that rises above all odds. Where hope is kindled by the power of human kindness in the most desperate of moments. Welcome to Silent Frontier Stories. On a night when the snow fell thick and heavy, a mother walked into a storm with 5 young children, with no shelter in sight, only love and resilience. Come, Keichu, step into this story and feel the strength that rises above all odds. Where hope is kindled by the power of human kindness in the most desperate of moments. Maggie Ellison's fingers were black. She could see it even in the dark, even through the snow whipping sideways across her face. Black fingers meant dead fingers, and dead fingers meant she was running out of time. She dropped to her knees in the snow, and her 2-year-old daughter was limp against her chest, burning with a fever so high that steam rose off the child's skin into the frozen air. Behind her, 4 children stood shivering in a line, waiting for their mother to get up again. Maggie looked at her black fingers. She looked at her children. She got up. Friends, if this story touches your heart, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow Maggie's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's continue. The roof had given way at dawn. Maggie heard it first, a groan that came from somewhere deep in the timber, then a crack so loud it woke all 5 children at once. She threw herself over Lily's crib, and the world came down. Snow and wood and nails. A beam caught her shoulder, and she bit through her own lip to keep from screaming, because if she screamed, the children would panic, and if the children panicked, somebody would die. "Clara, get the babies out, now!" Clara was already moving. 13 years old, and she moved like a grown woman when trouble came, grabbing Sam off his pallet with one hand, shoving Rosie toward the door with the other. Hank had his boots on before anyone else. He kicked the door open, and the Wyoming winter poured in like floodwater. "Mama, you're bleeding!" Rosie's voice, high and sharp. "I'm fine. Move! All of you, move!" They tumbled out into the snow in their nightclothes. Maggie came last, clutching Lily to her chest, the baby so hot against her skin that it felt like holding a coal from the fire. Behind them, half the cabin roof sagged inward. The timber frame snapped like a spine. Maggie stood in the snow, barefoot, bleeding from her lip and her shoulder, holding her sick baby. And she looked at what was left of her home, the home Robert had built, the home she had fought for, bled for, starved for in the 2 years since they put Robert in the ground. "Mama, I'm cold," Sam whispered. He was 5. He said it the way 5-year-olds say things, not complaining, just reporting a fact. His lips were already blue. Maggie moved fast. She went back inside, ducking under the collapsed beam. She pulled every blanket, every coat, every piece of cloth she could reach. She wrapped Sam first, then Rosie, then Hank, though Hank tried to push her hands away. "I don't need it, Mama. Give it to the girls." "Henry Robert Ellison, you put this coat on right now." He put it on. She checked the fireplace. The collapse had blocked the flue. No fire, no heat. She looked at the woodpile outside, buried under debris and snow. She could dig it out. It would take an hour. Lily did not have an hour. "Clara, how's the baby?" Clara had Lily now, pressed against her chest, rocking her the way Maggie had taught her. "She's real hot, Mama, and she's not crying no more." That was the thing that decided it. A sick baby who cries is a baby who fights. A sick baby who goes quiet is a baby who is giving up. Maggie looked at the sky, gray and heavy, snow falling thick as cotton. She looked east, toward Silver Creek. 4 miles, maybe 5. The doctor was there. Warmth was there. Life was there. 4 miles through a blizzard with 5 children, the youngest burning up, the oldest barely a teenager. Robert, she thought. Robert, if you can hear me, I need you to help me keep them alive. We're walking to town, she said. Mama, we can't, Clara said. The storm. We're walking to town, Clara. Put Lily inside your coat against your skin. Hank, you carry Sam. Rosie, you hold Hank's belt and you don't let go. We stay together. Nobody stops, nobody sits down. What if we get lost? Hank asked. We follow the fence line east. Your father built that fence, and it runs straight to the Silver Creek Road. We follow the fence, we find the road, we find town. She said it with a certainty she did not feel, because her children needed her certain, the way they needed air. They walked. The wind hit them the moment they left the shelter of the cabin. It came from the north, driving snow so hard it felt like sand, and Maggie leaned into it with Lily tucked inside her coat, the baby's cheek against her collarbone. She could feel the fever through her clothes. It was wrong. No child should be that hot. Stay close, she shouted over the wind. Stay on the fence. She kept her left hand on the fence wire. Robert's fence. He had strung it himself, post by post, the summer before he died. He had joked that it would outlast him. He had not known how right he was. They walked for 20 minutes before Rosie fell. She went down face first, and Hank yanked her up by the back of her coat, rough but fast. I'm okay, Rosie said. Her teeth were chattering so hard the words came out in pieces. I slipped is all. You're doing good, Rosie, Maggie said. Real good. Keep walking. Mama, I'm pretending we're going to a party. A big party with cake and a fire. That's a good party, baby. You're invited. Maggie almost broke right there. She held it together because she had to, because 5 children were watching her, because a mother does not break until her children are safe, and her children were not safe yet. They walked. The fence line led them east. The snow came down harder. Sam stopped talking first. He buried his face in Hank's neck and went still, and Hank's steps got slower under the weight. But he did not complain, and he did not stop. Then Maggie's legs gave out. She went down on both knees, and the impact sent pain shooting up through her spine, and she stayed down, breathing hard, her vision going white at the edges. Mama! Clara was beside her in a second. Mama, get up! You got to get up! Clara! Maggie grabbed her daughter's arm. Her fingers left red marks on Clara's coat, and she realized she was bleeding from her hands now. The skin cracked open from the cold. Clara, listen. If I can't get up... Don't say that! If I can't get up, you take them. Follow the fence east. Don't stop for nothing. You find the doctor, and you tell him Lily's had a fever for 2 days. You tell him, You're getting up, Mama. Clara's eyes were fierce, bright with tears that froze the second they fell. You're getting up right now because I ain't doing this without you. None of us are. Maggie looked at her daughter, 13 years old, already carrying more weight than most grown women, already tougher than most men she had known. When did you grow up, she thought. When did my baby girl become this? She got up. Her knees screamed. Her hands burned. She got up anyway because Clara told her to, and somehow her 13-year-old daughter giving her an order was exactly what she needed. They walked. Maggie stopped feeling her feet. She stopped feeling her hands. The only thing she could feel was Lily's heat against her chest and the fence wire under her fingers. And she followed that wire the way a drowning person follows a rope, hand over hand, step by step, because Robert built this fence, and Robert would lead her home, even from the grave. If she died out here, Virgil Cobb would have her land by spring. The thought came unbidden, sharp and hot. Cobb had been circling for a year, offering prices so low they were insults, sending his men to tear down her fence, poisoning the town against her so nobody would help the stubborn widow who would not sell. If Maggie died in this blizzard, there would be no one left to fight him. Her children would be orphans, and Cobb would take everything Robert had built. That made her angry. And anger, it turned out, was warmer than hope. She walked faster. Then the fence ended. Maggie's hand closed on the last post, and then there was nothing. Just snow and wind and empty space. The fence ran out. She could not see the road. She could not see anything except white in every direction. And for the first time since she walked out of her broken cabin, Maggie felt fear so thick it nearly choked her. "Mama?" Hank's voice, tight and scared. "Where's the road?" "It's here. It's close." She did not know that. She did not know anything except that her children were freezing and her baby was dying, and she had led them into a white nothing with no fence to follow. She picked a direction. East, she hoped. She walked. 1 step. 2. 10. 20. The snow swallowed everything. There was no up, no down, no east, no west, just white. Maggie fell again. This time she did not get up right away. This time she lay face down in the snow and felt the cold pressing against her like a living thing, pushing her down, whispering that it was easier to stay, easier to close her eyes, easier to stop fighting. "Mama!" All of them now, all 4 voices at once, Clara and Hank and Rosie and Sam, calling for her, needing her, pulling her back from the edge. She put her hands flat on the snow and pushed. Her arms shook. Blood ran from her palms and disappeared into the white. She pushed harder. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, heavy and fast, coming through the storm from the east. The horse came out of the white like something from a dream, big and dark, blowing steam from its nostrils, and the man on its back was already swinging down before the animal stopped. He hit the ground running, and then he was in front of her, and Maggie looked up from her knees into the face of Josiah Beckett. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask if she was all right. He looked at her bleeding hands, looked at the children, looked at the shape of Lily inside Maggie's coat, and his jaw set hard. "My ranch, mile north. Can the older ones walk?" "Yes," Clara said before Maggie could answer. "We can walk." Josiah pulled off his coat and wrapped it around Clara and Lily in one motion. He lifted Sam off Hank's back and put him on the horse, then swung Rosie up behind. "Hold your brother, Rosie. Hold him tight." "Yes, sir. I'm real good at holding on to things." Something moved across Josiah's face. Quick, there and gone, like a door opening and closing. He turned to Maggie. "Can you stand?" "Can you second?" "We don't have a second. Your baby needs a fire and a doctor. I need you on your feet, Mrs. Ellison." Nobody had spoken to her like that in 2 years. Not with command, but with respect, like he expected her to be strong enough to do what needed doing. Maggie put her hand on the ground and pushed herself up. Her legs buckled. Josiah caught her elbow, held her steady. His grip was firm, and his hand was warm. "Lean on me." "I don't." "I know you don't." His voice dropped low, just for her. "I know you've been doing this alone, and I know you'd rather crawl than accept help from anybody. I can see it in you plain as day. But that baby against your chest is running out of time, and your other 4 children are watching you right now, waiting to see what you do. So you lean on me for 1 mile, Mrs. Ellison, and then you can go right back to hating the world tomorrow." Maggie stared at him, snow melting in his dark hair, brown eyes steady on hers. No pity, no charity, just a man telling her the truth. She put her arm around his waist. He was solid and warm, and when his arm came around her shoulders, something in her chest unlocked. Something she had been holding so tight for so long that she had forgotten it was there. They walked. Josiah led the horse with one hand and held Maggie upright with the other. Hank kept pace on the left side, his hand on the stirrup. Clara walked on the right, her eyes never leaving Lily. Halfway there, the horse stumbled. Its front leg punched through a snow-covered drift into a hole, and it lurched sideways. Rosie screamed. Sam grabbed the saddle horn. Josiah let go of Maggie and caught the horse's bridle with both hands, pulling the animal's head up, steadying it with his voice. "Easy, easy now. You're all right." The horse found its footing. Rosie was shaking, but still holding Sam. Josiah checked both children with his hands, quick and sure, then turned back to Maggie. "You still standing?" "I'm still standing." He almost smiled. Almost. They walked the rest of the mile in silence. Then the shape of a house came through the snow. Big, solid. Smoke pouring from the chimney. A barn beside it. Fence posts standing straight and strong. Josiah pushed the door open. Heat poured out, and Maggie's legs gave way on the threshold. She caught the doorframe. Behind her, Hank made a sound she had never heard from him before, a sob of relief that he tried to swallow and could not. "Bring Lily to the fire," Josiah said. He was already inside, pulling quilts from a wooden chest, stoking the flames higher. "Clara, get her wet clothes off. There's dry blankets in that chest." They moved. All of them. Clara unwrapped Lily with hands that trembled, and Maggie saw her baby's face in the firelight. Flushed red, her breathing shallow and fast. But breathing. Still breathing. "Hank, there's a kettle on the stove. Fill it from the barrel by the door. Rosie, Sam, sit right there by the fire. Don't move." Rosie sat down on the rug, pulling Sam into her lap. She looked around the room with wide eyes. On the mantel above the fireplace, next to a lantern and a tin cup, there was a small wooden picture frame turned face down, and beside it, a woman's lace handkerchief, folded neat and careful, yellowed with age. Rosie reached for it. "Don't touch that, sweetheart," Josiah said. Not sharp, just quiet. Rosie pulled her hand back. Maggie saw it. The frame, the handkerchief, the way he said it. She filed it away in the part of her mind that cataloged things without understanding them yet. Josiah turned to her. "There's a bedroom through that door. Dry clothes in the wardrobe. They'll be too big. They'll be warm." "My baby." "Clara's got her. Let your daughter do what she's been trained to do." He held her gaze. "Get dry. Get warm. I'm riding into Silver Creek for the doctor." "It's 4 miles in a blizzard." "It's 4 miles. You could die out there. Your daughter could die in here." He said it plain. No drama. Just the truth, laid out bare. "I'll take a fresh horse. I'll be back in 2 hours, maybe less." He pulled his wet coat back on. He put his hat on. He walked to the door and opened it, and the storm rushed in, cold and white and howling. "Mr. Beckett." He stopped. Maggie stood in his house, dripping snowmelt on his floor, her hands bleeding, her body shaking, her baby sick by his fire. She had spent 2 years trusting nobody, 2 years building walls out of silence and stubbornness, 2 years proving she needed no man, no help, no mercy from anyone. "You come back," she said. Josiah looked at her. Then he looked at her children, each one, the way a man looks at something he has already decided to protect. "I'll be back." He closed the door. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the storm. Clara appeared at Maggie's side. "Mama, Lily's sleeping." She's still real hot, but she's sleeping. Maggie put her arm around her daughter. She looked at the fire, at Hank filling the kettle, at Rosie holding Sam on the rug, at the small shape of Lily wrapped in quilts on the settee. She looked at the door Josiah Beckett had just walked through. She looked at the face-down picture frame on the mantel, and the yellowed handkerchief beside it, and she wondered what kind of man rides into a killing storm for a woman he barely knows and children who were not his own. Hank brought the kettle to the stove and set it on the heat. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "You think you'll make it, Mama?" Maggie thought about Josiah's eyes when he looked at Lily. She thought about the way he had said 4 miles, like distance was just a fact and not a death sentence. She thought about the way his arm had felt around her shoulders, strong and steady, asking nothing in return. "He'll make it," she said. Rosie looked up from the rug. "Mama, is that cowboy man going to come back for real?" Maggie pressed her bleeding hands together. Outside, the wind screamed against the walls of a house built by a man who had something in his past that he kept face down on a mantel. "Yeah, baby, he's coming back." She sat down on the floor beside her children. Lily's small chest rose and fell. The fire crackled and popped. The storm hammered the windows, and somewhere in all that white, Josiah Beckett rode. He was gone 2 hours and 14 minutes. Maggie knew because she counted every one of them, sitting on the floor beside the settee where Lily lay, pressing her hand to her daughter's forehead every few minutes, measuring the fever with her palm, the way her own mother had taught her. Too hot. Still too hot. Clara had found tea in the kitchen. She brewed a pot without being asked and brought a cup to Maggie. And Maggie took it with hands that stung so bad from the warmth coming back into them that she nearly dropped it. "Drink it, Mama," Clara said. "You ain't had nothing since last night." "I'm fine." "You ain't fine. You're shaking and your hands look like raw meat, and you won't help nobody if you pass out on this man's floor." Maggie looked at her daughter, 13 years old and already bossing her mother around, just like Robert used to do. The thought hurt in a way that was almost sweet. She drank the tea. Hank had found the wood box by the fireplace and was feeding logs to the fire without being told, building it up careful and steady the way Robert had taught him. He had not said a word since they arrived. He just worked, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. Maggie knew that look. That was the look of a boy trying very hard not to feel anything, because feeling things was dangerous. Rosie had fallen asleep on the rug with Sam curled against her, both of them wrapped in one of Josiah's quilts. In sleep, they looked peaceful, like children who had not just walked through a blizzard. Maggie wanted to freeze that image. She wanted to hold it against all the other images in her head. The ones of her children shivering in the snow, the ones of Lily going limp, the ones of her own bloody handprints in the white. "Mama, who is he?" Clara asked, sitting down beside her. She kept her voice low so the others would not hear. "I mean, I know he's Mr. Beckett. Everybody knows Mr. Beckett. But why'd he come for us? Why is he doing all this?" "He saw the chimney smoke was wrong." "That's it? He just saw smoke and rode out in a blizzard?" "That's what he said." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Papa used to say you can tell a man's character by what he does when nobody's watching." Maggie's throat tightened. "Your papa was right." "Is Mr. Beckett a good man, Mama?" "I don't know yet, baby. But he's out there in that storm right now, trying to save your sister, and that counts for something." The wind slammed against the house so hard the walls shuddered. Hank looked up from the fire. "That's getting worse." "He'll make it," Maggie said. She said it because she had to, because her children needed her to believe it. Hank said nothing. He put another log on the fire and stared into the flames with his father's eyes. Lily whimpered. Maggie was on her knees beside the settee in a heartbeat, her hand on the baby's face, her ear close to the small mouth. Breathing, fast but steady. The whimper was good. The whimper meant she was still in there, still fighting. "Hold on, baby girl. Help is coming. You just hold on." She was talking to Lily, but she was also talking to herself. The door slammed open at 2 hours and 14 minutes. Josiah came through first, covered in snow, ice in his hair, his face raw and red from the wind. Behind him came a man Maggie did not recognize at first, a tall, thin figure wrapped in a heavy coat, carrying a leather medical bag. "Where's the child?" The doctor pushed past Josiah, shaking snow from his shoulders. He was older, maybe 60, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and hands that were already reaching for his bag. "Here." Maggie stepped back from the settee. "She's had a fever 2 days. It spiked this morning. She stopped crying about 3 hours ago." The doctor knelt beside Lily and pressed his ear to her chest. He lifted her eyelid. He felt her pulse. His face gave nothing away, and Maggie wanted to grab him by the collar and shake him until answers fell out. "Doc Marsh?" Josiah said from the doorway. He had not come further into the room. He stood there dripping snowmelt, watching. "What do you need?" "Hot water, clean cloth, and quiet." Doc Marsh opened his bag and pulled out instruments. He looked at Maggie. "You the mother?" "Yes." "She been eating?" "Not since yesterday. She won't take nothing, not even water." "Vomiting?" "Twice yesterday. Nothing today." Doc Marsh nodded. He worked fast, his old hands sure and steady. He listened to Lily's chest again, felt her belly, checked her throat. Maggie stood with her arms wrapped around herself, watching every move, reading every twitch of his face. Clara brought hot water and clean cloths without being asked. Doc Marsh looked at her. "How old are you, girl?" 13, sir." "You boil that water yourself?" "Yes, sir." "Good girl. Hold this." He handed Clara a small bottle. "When I tell you, pour 3 drops into the water. Not 4, 3. Clara held the bottle like it was made of gold. Josiah had come further into the room now, still dripping, standing near the fireplace where Hank was watching with hard eyes. Maggie saw Josiah look at the boy. She saw him take in Hank's clenched jaw, his stiff shoulders, the way he positioned himself between Josiah and his sleeping siblings on the rug. Josiah did not try to talk to him. He just stood there, keeping his distance, letting the boy hold his ground. Maggie noticed that. She filed it away. "Mrs. Ellison?" Doc Marsh stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Your daughter has a chest infection. The fever is high, but it has not broken into pneumonia yet. I say yet because if she does not get proper care in the next 48 hours, it will." "What does she need?" "Warmth, fluids. This medicine every 4 hours." He held up a small brown bottle. "She needs to be kept in a warm, dry room with constant attention. She cannot go back out in that cold. Not for days, maybe a week." Maggie's stomach dropped. A week. She had no home. Her cabin roof was caved in. She had no money for a boarding house. No family within 1,000 miles. And the people of Silver Creek had made it clear over the past 2 years that the stubborn widow Ellison was not their problem. "She can stay here." Josiah's voice came from behind her, calm and matter-of-fact. "All of you can stay here." Maggie turned to face him. "Mr. Beckett, I cannot impose on you like that. You've already done more than—" "Mrs. Ellison, where else are you going to go?" The question hung in the air. Maggie opened her mouth, closed it. She had no answer, and they both knew it. "Your cabin's got no roof," Josiah said. "Your baby's sick. You got 4 other children who just walked through a blizzard in their night clothes. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house is full up through winter. I know because I asked on the way back. So you tell me, Where else are you going to go? I will not be a charity case. Nobody said you were. People will talk. People already talk. That's what people do. Maggie felt the heat rise in her face. You don't understand. I have spent 2 years making sure I don't owe anyone in this town a single thing. Because the minute you owe someone, they own you. The minute you depend on someone, your children stay alive. Josiah said it quiet and even, but it landed like a fist. Your pride is your business, Mrs. Ellison. But those 5 children are not props in your war against the world. They are cold, scared, hungry kids who need a roof and a fire and a safe place to sleep. I have all of that, and I am offering it. No strings, no debt, no ownership. The room was silent. Even Doc Marsh had stopped moving. Hank was staring at Josiah with something Maggie could not read. Clara was holding the medicine bottle against her chest, her eyes moving between her mother and this man. Rosie stirred on the rug. She looked up at Josiah with sleep-heavy eyes. Are we staying at your house, mister? Josiah looked at Maggie. He waited. Maggie closed her eyes. She thought about Robert. She thought about the promise she had made at his grave, that she would keep their children safe no matter what it cost her. She thought about Lily's shallow breathing and Sam's blue lips, and Clara carrying burdens no child should carry. We're staying, she said, but I'm working for it. I cook, I clean, I earn our keep. This is not a gift. Fair enough, Josiah nodded once. There's a spare bedroom upstairs, bigger than the one down here. The children can have that. I'll set up a cot down here by the fire for Lily, so she stays warm through the night. And where do I sleep? Wherever you want, Mrs. Ellison. It's a big house. Doc Marsh cleared his throat. If you two are done negotiating, I need someone to give this child her first dose. He held out the medicine bottle to Maggie. 3 drops in warm water, every 4 hours. Wake her if you have to. She needs fluids more than sleep right now. Maggie took the bottle. Her hands were wrapped in bandages now. She did not remember Josiah wrapping them, but he must have at some point during the argument, because the white cloth was there and the bleeding had stopped. She knelt beside Lily and lifted the baby's head gently, pressing the cup to her lips. Come on, baby girl. Drink for Mama. Lily whimpered. She turned her head away. Lily Grace Ellison, you drink this right now. Maggie's voice cracked. She held the cup steady. You are the stubbornest child God ever made, and I love you for it, but right now you're gonna drink. Lily drank. 2 sips. 3. Then she turned her face into the quilt and closed her eyes. Good enough for now, Doc Marsh said. He was putting his coat back on. I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. Keep her warm, keep pushing fluids. If the fever breaks tonight, she'll be all right. If it doesn't break by morning, send for me. I'll drive you back, Josiah said. In this storm, I'll take my own horse, thank you. I've been riding through Wyoming winters since before you were born, Beckett. Josiah walked the doctor to the door. Maggie heard them talking in low voices on the porch, too quiet for her to make out the words. Then the door closed, and Josiah was back inside, pulling off his wet boots, moving to the kitchen. When's the last time these children ate? He asked. Maggie had to think. Supper last night, before the storm got bad. Josiah said nothing. He opened the pantry and started pulling things out. Flour, salt pork, beans, dried apples. He moved around the kitchen with the ease of a man who cooked for himself and had been doing it for years. Hank appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had not spoken directly to Josiah since they arrived. Now he stood there, 11 years old, arms crossed, his father's jaw, his father's eyes. You don't have to do this, Hank said. His voice was tight. We can take care of ourselves. Josiah looked at the boy. He did not talk down to him. He did not smile or try to charm him. He spoke to Hank the way one man speaks to another. "I know you can. I've been watching your family for 2 years, and I know exactly how much your mother and you have handled on your own. You've done a man's work since you were 9. Nobody's taking that away from you. Then why are you helping?" "Because your sister is sick, and it's 20 below outside, and helping is what neighbors do." "Nobody else in this town ever helped us." The words came out hard and bitter, too bitter for an 11-year-old boy. And Maggie, listening from the other room, felt them like a blade between her ribs. Because Hank was right. Nobody had helped. Not when the fence came down, not when the well froze, not when Virgil Cobb sent his men to scare her into selling. The good people of Silver Creek had looked the other way, and Hank had learned the lesson. Trust nobody. Josiah set down the flower. He looked at Hank straight on. "You're right. This town has not done right by your family, and I'm part of that, because I knew what was happening, and I should have stepped in sooner. I didn't, and that's on me. But I'm here now, and I'm asking you to let me help. Not because I think you're weak, because I think your mama has carried enough weight alone." Hank stared at him. His chin trembled once, just once, and then he locked it down. "You hurt my mama, or my sisters, or my brother, and I'll kill you. I don't care how big you are." Josiah did not laugh. He did not dismiss it. He looked at that 11-year-old boy making a death threat, and he said, "If I ever hurt anyone in your family, I'll deserve it." Hank held his gaze for 3 long seconds. Then he turned and walked back to the fire. Maggie wiped her eyes with the back of her bandaged hand. She had heard every word. She was not supposed to have heard it, but she had. And the sound of Josiah Beckett talking to her son like an equal, not patronizing him, not dismissing his anger, had cracked something open in her that she was not ready to examine. Josiah cooked. Simple food, salt pork and beans and biscuits and stewed apples. He brought plates to the children first, then to Maggie, then sat at the kitchen table and ate his own supper alone. Rosie ate like she had not seen food in a week. Sam ate slowly, watching Josiah from behind his plate with enormous eyes. Clara ate with one hand and held Lily's medicine cup with the other, counting the minutes until the next dose. Hank ate without looking at anyone. After supper, Josiah set up the spare bedroom upstairs. Maggie heard him moving furniture, making up beds. He came back down carrying extra quilts and a pillow. "Bedroom's ready. There's 2 beds up there. Clara and Rosie can share the big one. Hank and Sam in the other. I've set a cot by the fire down here for Lily." He paused. "There's a rocking chair in the corner if you want to sit with her through the night." Maggie nodded. Not for food, but for touch, for connection, for the simple human warmth of someone choosing to hold you. Then Rosie was gone, racing up the stairs after her siblings, and Josiah stood there with his hands at his sides and that look on his face that he did not know she had seen. The house went quiet, just the fire and the wind and Lily's breathing. Josiah busied himself banking the fire for the night. He moved around the room with the careful silence of a man trying not to intrude on someone else's pain. Maggie sat in the rocking chair with Lily in her arms, rocking slow and steady, humming something she did not even realize she was humming, until Josiah stopped moving and listened. "That's pretty," he said. "What is it?" "Just something my mama used to sing. I don't even know the words anymore. Just the tune." Josiah sat down in the chair across from her, far enough to be proper, close enough to be present. "My mother used to sing too. Church hymns mostly. She had a voice like clear water." "She's gone?" "Long time ago, before the war." Maggie rocked. Lily's breathing hitched and then steadied. "Grief doesn't care about time." He looked at her then, really looked, And she saw that he understood what she meant, because he was living it too. Two people sitting in a warm room in the middle of a blizzard, both of them carrying the weight of someone they had lost, both of them trying to figure out how to keep living with that weight. "Your husband," he said. "Robert. He was a good man." "You knew him?" "Not well. Saw him around town. Saw the way he worked that land, the way he built that fence. A man who builds fence that straight in Wyoming territory takes pride in what he does. I respected that." Maggie felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back. "He died in the mine collapse. Everyone says it was quick, but I don't know if that's true or if people just say that to make widows feel better." "Maybe both." Lily stirred. Maggie checked the time by the clock on the mantel. Almost midnight. She reached for the medicine. "Let me," Josiah said. He poured the water, counted the drops. 3. Exactly 3. And brought the cup to her. Their fingers touched on the tin cup, and neither of them pulled away. "Thank you," Maggie said, "for riding out in that storm, for bringing the doctor, for all of this." "You already thanked me." "I know. I'm thanking you again because once was not enough." Josiah sat back down. He watched her give Lily the medicine, watched the baby swallow, watched Maggie wipe her daughter's chin with the corner of a blanket. "Mrs. Ellison." "Maggie, if I'm calling you Josiah, you'd better call me Maggie." "Maggie." He said her name like he was tasting it. "Your cabin needs a new roof. I can have my men out there in 2 days, soon as this storm breaks." "I can't pay for—" "I didn't ask for pay." "And I told you I don't take charity." "Then call it a trade. I fix your roof, you teach my ranch hands to read. Half of them can't sign their own names, and it's becoming a problem for business." He said it smooth, like he had been thinking about it, like it was practical and not generous. But Maggie saw through it. "You just made that up." "I absolutely did not." "Josiah Beckett, you are a terrible liar." He almost smiled. That almost smile she had seen once before, in the snow, when at 3 a.m. he stood beside the rocking chair, and he was there, solid and present, and that was enough. When the tears passed, Maggie wiped her face with her bandaged hand and looked up at him. "I must look a sight." "You look like a mother who just kept 5 children alive through the worst night of her life." His voice was rough around the edges. "You look like the strongest person I've ever met." Maggie held his gaze. In the firelight, his brown eyes were warm, and the scar on his arm caught the light, and he stood there in his own house, in the middle of the night, with a woman he barely knew and her sick baby, and he looked at her like she was worth every mile he had ridden through that storm. "Get some sleep, Maggie," he said. "I'll watch Lily." "You don't have to." "I know." He sat down in the rocking chair as she stood. She laid Lily on the cot, tucking the quilts around her. Then she stood there, looking at Josiah Beckett rocking her daughter's cot with his boot, his eyes on the fire, his hands folded across his chest. She went upstairs. She checked each child. Clara, sleeping with her arm thrown over her face. Rosie, curled in a ball. Hank, flat on his back with his boots still on, because even in sleep he was ready to run. Sam, tucked against his brother's side with his thumb in his mouth. 5 children, all alive, all warm, all safe. Maggie stood in the hallway of a stranger's house and pressed her back against the wall and breathed. Downstairs, Josiah rocked the cot and watched the fire and listened to the storm, and thought about a woman with bleeding hands who got up every time she fell. He thought about the way she had said, "You come back," not as a question, but as an order, as if she had the right to demand his return. He thought about the way her voice sounded when she hummed that song she did not know the words to. He thought about Ellen, 6 years gone. He thought about the picture frame face down on the mantel. He reached over and touched the yellowed handkerchief beside it. Then he pulled his hand back and watched the fire and rocked the cot and waited for morning. Morning came gray and still. The storm had blown itself out some time before dawn, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of fresh snow and a silence so deep it felt like the earth was holding its breath. Maggie woke to the sound of children laughing. She sat up fast, disoriented, her heart hammering, before she remembered where she was. Josiah Beckett's house. Upstairs bedroom. She had slept maybe 2 hours. She went downstairs and found Rosie sitting on the kitchen floor, feeding biscuit crumbs to a yellow dog that had apparently come in from the barn. Sam was beside her, his hand on the dog's back, and he was smiling. Maggie could not remember the last time she had seen Sam smile. "Mama, this is Biscuit," Rosie announced. "Mr. Josiah said his real name is Captain, but he looks like a biscuit, so that's what I'm calling him." "Where is Mr. Beckett?" "Outside. He and Hank are feeding the horses." Maggie went still. Hank is helping him? Hank said he wasn't helping. He said he was just making sure the horses were being treated right. Rosie scratched the dog's ears. "But he's been out there an hour, so I think he's helping." Maggie checked Lily. The baby was awake, her eyes clear for the first time in days, reaching for the quilt fringe with small, curious fingers. The fever was gone. Not reduced. Gone. Maggie pressed her lips to Lily's forehead and breathed in the warm, alive smell of her daughter. "You scared me half to death, Lily Grace." Lily grabbed a fistful of her mother's hair and yanked. Maggie laughed. It came out rough and strange because she had not laughed in so long that her body had almost forgotten how. Clara was in the kitchen, cooking. She had found eggs and salt pork and was frying them with the confident efficiency of a girl who had been running a household since she was 11. She looked at Maggie, and something passed between them, mother to daughter. A shared understanding of what they had survived and what it had cost them. "You sleep all right, Mama?" "I slept fine. You didn't have to cook." "Somebody had to. And Mr. Beckett's been up since before dawn. I heard him go out. He checked on Lily 3 times before the sun came up." Maggie absorbed that. 3 times. She had not heard him. She must have been sleeping deeper than she thought, which meant her body had decided, without her permission, that this house was safe enough to let her guard down. That frightened her almost as much as the blizzard had. The front door opened, and Hank came in, stamping snow from his boots, his cheeks red from the cold. Behind him, Josiah ducked through the doorway, carrying a pail of milk. "Your boy knows his way around horses," Josiah said, setting the pail on the kitchen table. "He's got good hands. Gentle." Hank's face flushed. "I just did what needed doing. That's all any of us do." Josiah hung his coat on the peg by the door. He looked at Maggie, and something shifted in his expression, quick and private. "Lily's fever?" "Gone. She's awake and pulling my hair." "Good sign." He almost smiled. That almost smile that Maggie was starting to catalog the way she cataloged storms, noting when they appeared, what caused them, how quickly they passed. "Doc Marsh will be out this afternoon to check on her. Storm's cleared enough for travel." They ate breakfast together at Josiah's table. 6 Ellisons and 1 Beckett, crowded around a table built for 2. Rosie talked enough for everyone, telling Josiah about the books Maggie used to read to them, about how Clara could sew better than anyone in Silver Creek, about how Hank once caught a fish so big it pulled him into the river. "It wasn't that big," Hank muttered, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Sam ate quietly, sitting as close to Maggie as he could get, but his eyes kept drifting to Josiah. At one point, when Josiah reached across the table for the salt, His arm passed near Sam, and the boy flinched. Josiah noticed. He pulled his arm back slowly, made himself smaller in his chair, and when he needed the salt again, he asked Clara to pass it. Maggie saw all of it. She saw a man who understood that a child's fear was not something you fixed with force or charm, but with patience and distance and time. After breakfast, a wagon came up the road. Maggie heard the horses first, then voices, and then a woman's voice, loud and cheerful, cutting through the cold air like a bell. "Joe Beckett, you open this door before I freeze to death on your porch." Josiah opened the door, and a woman blew in like a second storm. She was maybe 28, dark-haired, brown-eyed, built strong and compact, with the same jaw as Josiah and the same way of filling a room just by walking into it. "Tess," Josiah said, "I was going to send word. Ruth Dawson told me everything. She heard from Doc Marsh this morning." Tess pulled off her gloves and looked around the room until her eyes landed on Maggie. She crossed the room in 4 strides and took Maggie's bandaged hands in hers, gentle as anything. "Mrs. Ellison, I'm Tess Beckett, this one's sister. I brought supplies, clothes for the children, food, and some medicines Ruth put together." "That's very kind, but don't you dare say you can't accept it." Tess squeezed her hands. "I've been hearing about you for 2 years, how you've been running that homestead alone with 5 little ones. And I've been meaning to come introduce myself, and I didn't, and I'm ashamed of that. So you're going to let me help, and we're going to be friends, and that's the end of the discussion." Maggie looked at this woman. She had Josiah's directness, but none of his reserve. She was all warmth and motion and stubborn generosity, and Maggie found herself wanting to resist, and unable to. "All right," Maggie said. "Good. Now where's the baby? I want to see her." Tess swept through the house like she owned it, cooing over Lily, charming Rosie, teasing Clara about her cooking, and somehow getting Sam to let her pick him up without crying, which was something even Maggie struggled with. She treated Hank like an adult, asking his opinion about the horses, and Hank responded with more words than he had spoken to anyone besides Maggie in months. While Tess occupied the children, Josiah pulled Maggie aside. They stood on the porch, the cold air sharp after the warmth of the house. "I rode past your cabin this morning," he said. "Roof's worse than I thought. Half the support beams are cracked. It's not just the snow. The timber was rotting. Robert built that roof. Robert did the best he could with what he had, but it needed replacing 2 years ago and nobody told you because nobody was looking out for you." He said it plain. No judgment, no accusation. "I can have a crew out there day after tomorrow. New beams, new timber. Take about a week. And I teach your men to read." "That's the deal." Maggie looked out at the snow-covered land. Somewhere under all that white was her homestead, her land, the only thing Robert had left her. "Josiah, why didn't Virgil Cobb buy your fence line when he was buying everyone else's?" Josiah's jaw tightened. It was subtle, but Maggie had learned to read him in the short time she had known him, and that jaw meant anger kept on a short leash. "Cobb knows better than to come at me directly. He goes after people he thinks can't fight back. Widows, smallholders, families without connections. Families like mine." "Yes. He sent men to my property last month, told me the county was going to seize my land for back taxes. I went to the assessor's office, and there were no back taxes. He made it up." "I know." Maggie turned to look at him. "You know? I've been watching Cobb work his way through this valley for 3 years. He's bought out 6 families, all of them under pressure. He wants the water rights. Every parcel he buys gives him more control over the creek, and your land sits right on the best stretch of it. And you didn't think to tell me this? Would you have listened?" He met her eyes. 2 months ago, I tried to send one of my men over to fix your well pump. You sent him away with a shotgun." Maggie's face heated. "I didn't know who he was. A strange man showing up at a widow's homestead?" "I know. I should have come myself. I should have done a lot of things. He looked away, and she saw that muscle in his jaw jump again. I've been watching your family struggle for 2 years, Maggie. I watched from a distance because I told myself it was none of my business. Because I told myself you were handling it. Because getting involved meant caring, and caring meant... He stopped. Meant what? He was quiet for a long moment. The cold pressed against them. Meant risking something I wasn't sure I was ready to risk. Maggie did not ask what he meant. She did not need to. She understood risk. She understood the mathematics of loss. How once you had lost enough, the thought of gaining something new became terrifying, because gaining meant you had something to lose again. Cobb's not going to stop, she said. No, he's not. What do I do? You fight, and you don't fight alone. Before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats came from the south road. 3 riders, moving fast. Maggie recognized the lead horse before she recognized the rider. A big bay gelding that belonged to Virgil Cobb's foreman, a man named Harlan Polk. Josiah stepped forward. 1 step, just one, but it put him between Maggie and the approaching riders, and his hand dropped to his side in a way that was not casual. The 3 men pulled up at the edge of the yard. Polk was a thick, heavy man, with small eyes and a mouth that always looked like it was chewing something sour. The 2 men behind him were ranch hands, young and hard-faced. Beckett, Polk tipped his hat, but his eyes were on Maggie. Mrs. Ellison, Mr. Cobb heard about your trouble. Sent us to check on you. That's neighborly of Mr. Cobb, Josiah said. His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. But as you can see, Mrs. Ellison and her children are being looked after. Polk shifted in his saddle. Mr. Cobb wanted me to let Mrs. Ellison know that his offer for her property still stands. Given the damage to her cabin, he figured she might be reconsidering. Her roof collapses in a blizzard, and Cobb sends men before the snow's even melted? Josiah's voice stayed even, but something underneath it had gone cold and flat. That's real considerate timing. Mr. Cobb is a practical man. Mr. Cobb is a vulture. Polk's face darkened. Now that's not, the lady's land is not for sale. Josiah took another step forward. Not today, not tomorrow, not next month. And if I see Cobb's men on her property again, making up stories about back taxes or trying to run her fence line, I'll take it as a personal insult. You make sure Mr. Cobb understands that. Polk looked at Josiah, then at Maggie, then back at Josiah. Whatever he saw in the bigger man's face made him decide this conversation was over. I'll pass along your message. He turned his horse. Ma'am? The 3 riders disappeared down the road. Maggie realized she had been holding her breath. She let it out, and her hands were shaking. Though whether from cold or anger she could not tell. He'll be back, she said. Cobb doesn't give up. Neither do I. This isn't your fight, Josiah. He turned to face her, and there was something in his expression she had not seen before. Something fierce and raw. Maggie, a man who stands by and watches a woman lose everything she's built because he's afraid of getting involved, is no kind of man at all. I've been that man for 2 years, and I'm done with it. I don't need a protector. I know you don't. You need an ally. There's a difference. Maggie stared at him. The word sat between them, solid and clear. Ally. Not savior, not hero, not a man who swoops in and takes over. An ally. Someone who stands beside you and fights the same fight. All right, she said slowly. Allies. They went back inside. Tess had organized the children into some kind of game that involved the yellow dog and a great deal of shrieking laughter. Even Hank was participating, though he pretended not to be. Sam was sitting on Tess's lap, which was a miracle in itself, because Sam did not sit on anyone's lap except Maggie's. "Trouble?" Tess asked, reading her brother's face. "Cobb sent Polk." Tess's cheerful expression hardened into something that looked remarkably like Josiah. "Already? The man doesn't waste time." "He wants the water rights," Maggie said. "Josiah told me." Tess looked between them. Maggie saw her register the first names, the way they stood near each other, the shift in the air. Tess was not a woman who missed things. "Well then," Tess said, "I reckon we need to make sure he doesn't get them." That afternoon, while the children napped and Lily slept peacefully with no fever, Josiah spread a hand-drawn map on the kitchen table. He showed Maggie the parcels Cobb had already acquired, tracing the pattern with his finger. "He's buying up everything along the creek from Miller's Bend down to the South Fork. Your land and mine are the two pieces he doesn't have. Without them, he can't control the water. So he'll come for both of us. He'll come for you first, because he thinks you're easier to break. A widow with 5 children, no money, no connections. He figures one bad winter will do his work for him." Maggie looked at the map. She looked at her land, the small rectangle Robert had claimed and worked and died trying to build into something. It was not much. 80 acres of hard ground with a stretch of creek running through it. But it was hers, and it was her children's, and she would burn it to the ground before she let Virgil Cobb take it. "What are my options? Legal ones or practical ones?" "Both." Josiah leaned back in his chair. "Legally, your claim is solid. Robert filed it proper, and you inherited it proper. Cobb can't take it through the courts. He knows that. So he'll try to make your life so miserable you sell cheap. And practically? Practically, you need your cabin fixed, your fence rebuilt, your well pump repaired, and enough supplies to last the rest of winter. You need your cattle found, because I'll bet half of them scattered in the storm. And you need the people in this town to stop being afraid of Cobb long enough to stand with you. That's a lot of needing. That's why you don't do it alone." Tess appeared with coffee. She set a cup in front of each of them and sat down with her own. "I've been thinking. Ruth Dawson's been wanting to organize the women in town against Cobb for months. He cheated her on a land deal last year, and she's been spitting nails ever since. If we go to Ruth..." "Ruth Dawson is one woman," Maggie said. "Ruth Dawson knows every person in Silver Creek, and half of them owe her favors." Tess sipped her coffee. "You'd be surprised what one angry woman can accomplish when she puts her mind to it." Maggie looked at these two people, brother and sister, sitting at their own kitchen table, planning a war on behalf of a woman they barely knew and her 5 children. A week ago, she had been alone, completely, terrifyingly alone. "Why?" she asked. The word came out before she could stop it. "Why are you doing this? Both of you. You don't owe me anything. You don't know me." Tess looked at Josiah. Josiah looked at his coffee. "I know you, Maggie," he said quietly. "I've watched you for 2 years. I know you get up every morning before dawn and work until after dark. I know you taught your children to read using the family Bible because you couldn't afford books. I know you gave your coat to Clara last winter and went without one yourself for 3 months. I know you walked into that blizzard yesterday because your baby was sick and you would rather die in the snow than sit and watch her suffer." He looked up. His brown eyes were steady and bare. "I know you, and I should have done something about it a long time ago." The room was very quiet. Tess was looking at her brother with an expression Maggie could not decipher, something between surprise and recognition. "Joe," Tess said softly. She had not called him Joe before. You never told me. Nothing to tell. He stood up, pushing back his chair. I'm going to check on the horses. He walked out and the door closed behind him, and Maggie sat at the table with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her heart doing something it had no right to do. Tess waited until his boots faded on the porch. Then she looked at Maggie with those brown eyes that were so much like her brother's. He's been alone 6 years, Tess said, since Ellen died. He built this ranch into the biggest operation in the territory, and he did it by working himself half to death, because working meant he didn't have to feel. I've watched him close off, year by year, and I'd about given up hoping he'd ever let someone in again. Tess, I'm not saying you are. I'm saying he rode into a blizzard for you. My brother, who hasn't taken a risk on another human being in 6 years, rode into a killing storm because he saw your chimney smoke was wrong. Tess set down her coffee cup. You do with that what you will, but I thought you should know what it means. Maggie said nothing. She sat there in the kitchen of a man she had known for 2 days and felt the ground shifting under her feet, felt the walls she had built, brick by brick, over 2 years of grief and survival, starting to crack. Not falling, not yet, but cracking. Upstairs, one of the children stirred. Maggie heard small feet on the floor, then Sam's voice calling for her, and she stood up, because that was what she did. Her children called, and she answered. Always. But as she climbed the stairs, she stopped on the landing and looked out the window. Josiah was in the yard, standing by the fence, looking out at the white expanse of snow. He stood the way he always stood, solid and still, like a man who had learned to carry weight without bending. And Maggie stood at the window and watched him, and let herself feel, just for a moment, the terrifying possibility that she did not have to carry her weight alone anymore. Then Sam called again, and she went to her son and picked him up and held him close, and the moment passed. But it did not disappear. It stayed in her chest like an ember, small and quiet, waiting for air. That evening, after supper, after the children were asleep, Maggie sat in the rocking chair with Lily, and Josiah sat in his chair, and they did not talk about Cobb or the ranch or the future. They talked about nothing important. He told her about a horse he was training that kept trying to bite him. She told him about Rosie's imaginary friend, who apparently lived in a tree. He laughed, and the sound of it, rare and real, filled the room in a way that made the house feel less like his and more like something else entirely. At midnight, Maggie stood to take Lily upstairs. Maggie, she stopped. Your land borders mine on the north side. I know. There's no fence between our properties. Never has been. Just open ground. She waited. I always liked that, he said. No fence between us. Maggie held her sleeping daughter against her chest. She looked at Josiah Beckett sitting in his chair by the fire. This man who had ridden through a blizzard for her, who had fought Cobb's men for her, who had watched her for 2 years and never said a word until the moment she needed him most. I always liked that too, she said. She went upstairs. She put Lily in the crib Josiah had brought down from the attic, a crib he must have built for a child he never had, and she did not let herself think about that, because thinking about it would break her open in ways she was not ready for. She lay down beside Clara and closed her eyes. In the room below, Josiah sat in the dark and listened to the house breathe around him. 6 people sleeping under his roof, 5 children and a woman with bleeding hands who got up every time she fell. He reached over and picked up the picture frame from the mantel. He did not turn it over. He just held it for a moment. Then he set it back down, face up. 3 days later, Josiah's men finished Maggie's roof. She stood in her cabin doorway and looked up at fresh timber, straight and solid, the smell of new-cut pine mixing with the cold winter air. It was better than the original, stronger. She ran her hand along the doorframe and felt something she had not expected to feel. Gratitude, without shame. "It'll hold through anything," Josiah said from behind her. "Double brace the supports. That roof's not coming down again." "It's good work." "My men know what they're doing." He paused. "You want to move back in today?" Maggie looked around the cabin. 5 days at Josiah's ranch. 5 days of warmth, food, safety. 5 days of watching her children come alive in ways she had not seen since Robert died. Rosie had adopted the yellow dog. Sam had started talking to Tess. Hank had spent every morning in the barn with Josiah, learning about horses, and the hard, angry set of his jaw had begun to soften. Clara had slept past dawn for the first time in 2 years, and Lily was healthy. Running a low-grade fever that Doc Marsh said was nothing to worry about, eating solid food, pulling herself up on furniture and babbling at anyone who would listen. "Yes," Maggie said, "we should move back." She saw something cross his face, quick, gone before she could name it. "I'll have Tess help you get settled." They moved back that afternoon. Josiah's men had restocked her woodpile, repaired the well pump, and patched the gaps in the walls where the cold had been getting in. Someone had left a sack of flour, a side of salt pork, and 24 eggs on her kitchen table. Maggie did not ask who. She already knew. The cabin felt small after Josiah's house. Small and quiet and empty in a way it had not felt before. And Maggie hated herself for noticing. That first night back, after the children were asleep, she sat at her kitchen table and wrote a letter to the county assessor's office, requesting official confirmation that her property taxes were current and her claim was in good standing. She wrote a second letter to the Territorial Land Office in Cheyenne, documenting Cobb's harassment. And she wrote a third letter, the hardest one, to her sister in Philadelphia, admitting that things were difficult and asking if she knew any lawyers who handled land disputes. She sealed all 3 letters and set them aside. Then she sat in the dark and listened to her children breathe, and tried not to think about how different the silence sounded here compared to Josiah's house. In the morning, Hank was gone. Maggie found his bed empty, his boots missing, his coat gone from the peg. She searched the cabin, the yard, the outhouse. Nothing. Panic hit her like a wall of ice water. "Clara, where's your brother?" Clara was feeding Lily. She looked up with calm eyes. "He went to Mr. Beckett's ranch. Said he had work to do." "He what?" "He left at first light. Said Mr. Beckett promised to teach him how to break a colt today, and he wasn't missing it." Maggie stood in her kitchen, one hand on the table, the other pressed against her chest, where her heart was trying to hammer its way out. Her 11-year-old son had walked a mile through snow in the dark to get to a man's ranch because that man had promised to teach him something. She should be angry. She should march over there and drag Hank home by his ear. He had no business going anywhere without permission, especially in winter, especially alone. But Maggie sat down instead. She sat down and pressed her palms flat on the table and breathed. Robert had died when Hank was 9. For 2 years, the boy had tried to fill a space that no child should have to fill. He had chopped wood, mended fences, chased off coyotes, stood between his mother and the world, with his fists clenched and his heart breaking. He had not complained. He had not cried. He had simply worked, day after day, because that was what his father would have done. And now he had found a man who treated him like he mattered, not like a burden, not like a fatherless boy to be pitied, like a person worth teaching, worth talking to, worth spending time with. Maggie could not take that from him. She would not. She let him go. Every morning for the next week, Hank left at dawn and walked to Josiah's ranch. He came home at supper time, exhausted and alive in a way Maggie had not seen since before Robert died. He talked about horses at the dinner table. He talked about the cattle, about fence building, about the way Josiah could calm a frightened animal with just his voice and his hands. He says the trick is patience, Mama. He says you can't force a horse to trust you. You got to earn it, same as people. He's right about that, Maggie said. He taught me how to throw a rope today. I'm terrible at it, but he says I'll get better. Hank paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Mama, is it all right, me going over there? It's all right, Hank. Because if you don't want me to, Henry, it's all right. He looked at her with Robert's eyes, searching for the lie, the hesitation, the hidden cost. He found none. His shoulders dropped and he went back to eating, and Maggie turned away so he would not see her face. The following Monday, Maggie walked to Josiah's ranch to begin teaching his men to read. There were 4 of them. Jack, a wiry Texan in his 40s, who could rope anything that moved, but could not write his own name. Pete, a quiet young man from Missouri who stuttered when he was nervous. William, a former Buffalo soldier who had served in the cavalry and could read some but wanted to improve, and Miguel, a Mexican vaquero who spoke perfect English and perfect Spanish, but could not read in either language. They sat around Josiah's kitchen table with slates and chalk, looking at Maggie the way men look at a dentist, terrified but resigned. Gentlemen, we're going to start with the alphabet, Maggie said. And before any of you feel embarrassed about being here, let me tell you something. My husband couldn't read when I met him. He learned at 22, sitting at our kitchen table with a candle and a primer. And by the time he died, he had read more books than most college men. There's no shame in learning. The only shame is refusing to. Jack leaned back in his chair. Ma'am, I'm 43 years old. You really think you can teach an old dog like me? I taught the Miller boys back in Silver Creek to sit still for 20 minutes. Compared to that, you're easy. William laughed. Pete smiled. Miguel nodded. And they began. Maggie taught 3 days a week. She brought Lily with her, and Rosie and Sam, who played in Josiah's barn with the yellow dog, while Maggie worked at the kitchen table. Clara stayed home to manage the cabin, insisting she was old enough, and proving it by keeping the house running with an efficiency that made Maggie proud and sad in equal measure. Josiah was usually out working when Maggie taught. She saw him at a distance sometimes, on horseback, moving cattle, mending fence. But he always appeared when the lesson was over, as if he had timed it. He would come inside, pour coffee, and sit at the table while Maggie packed up her things. They talked. About the ranch, about the children, about Cobb. About nothing. About everything. He told her about the war, about Shiloh, about watching men die in mud and smoke and learning that life was too short and too fragile to waste on fear. She told him about Philadelphia, about her father's print shop, about growing up surrounded by books and ink and the belief that words could change the world. My father used to say that a man who can read is a man no one can enslave, Maggie said one afternoon. He said it was the most dangerous weapon there is. Your father sounds like a smart man. He was. He died when I was 16. Typhoid. I'm sorry. He left me his books, 2 trunks full. I brought them west with me when Robert and I came out here. They're the only thing of value I own. I'd say they're worth more than most things people consider valuable. She looked at him across the table. He was holding his coffee cup the way he held everything, steady and careful, like a man who had learned that the things you hold can be taken from you. Josiah, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. You turned Ellen's picture face up. I saw it this morning on the mantel. He did not look away. I did. Why? He took a long time to answer. The clock ticked. Outside, Rosie shrieked with laughter at something the dog did. Because keeping her face down was about hiding. And I'm tired of hiding. He set his cup down. She was a good woman, Maggie. The best I'd ever known. When she died, I thought that was it. I thought God or fate or whatever you want to call it had given me my one chance at happiness and taken it away. And anything more would be greedy. And now? Now I'm sitting in my kitchen talking to a woman who walked through a blizzard to save her children. And I'm thinking, maybe I was wrong about only getting one chance. The air between them changed. Maggie felt it the way you feel a storm coming, a shift in pressure, a charge that raises the hair on your arms. She should say something. She should redirect the conversation. She should protect herself. I'm not ready, she said. I need you to know that. Whatever this is, I'm not ready. I know. I have 5 children and a broken homestead and a man trying to steal my land, and I cannot afford to be distracted by Maggie. He said her name, and it stopped her, the way his hand on her wrist would have stopped her, firm and gentle. I'm not asking for anything. I'm telling you where I stand because you deserve honesty. That's all. You take whatever time you need. She nodded. Her hands were trembling, and she hid them in her lap. I should get the children home. I'll hitch the wagon. He drove them home in the wagon, Rosie chattering, Sam sleeping against Maggie's side, Lily on her lap. Hank rode alongside on one of Josiah's horses, sitting tall in the saddle with the easy grace of a boy who was becoming something new. At the cabin, Josiah set their things inside and stood on the porch, hat in hand. Ruth Dawson's calling a town meeting Friday night. About Cobb. I heard. She asked me to speak. I told her the person who should speak is you. Maggie's stomach nodded. Me? Stand up in front of the whole town? You're the one he's trying to run off. Your voice carries more weight than mine. The people in that town watched me struggle for 2 years and did nothing. And maybe hearing you tell them that will shake them hard enough to change. People aren't all bad, Maggie. Most of them are just scared. Cobb's got money and power, and he uses both like weapons. Someone's got to stand up first. Someone's got to show them it can be done. And you think that someone is me. I think you walked through a blizzard with 5 children. I think standing in front of some farmers and miners and telling them the truth should be easy by comparison. She almost laughed. You have a lot of faith in a woman you've known 2 weeks. I've known you 2 years. I just finally started talking to you 2 weeks ago. He left. Maggie stood on her porch and watched the wagon disappear down the road and felt something shifting inside her. Tectonic plates moving. The geography of her heart rearranging itself in ways she could not control. Friday came fast. Maggie dressed in her best, the navy wool dress she had pressed 3 times. Clara braided her hair. Rosie told her she looked like a queen. You're going to be great, Mama, Hank said. He stood by the door in his clean shirt, arms crossed, and for a moment he looked so much like Robert that Maggie lost her breath. The town hall was full, every chair taken, people standing along the walls. Maggie had not expected so many faces. Miners, ranchers, shopkeepers, their wives. Ruth Dawson sat in the front row, a stout woman with iron gray hair and eyes that could peel paint. Beside her sat Doc Marsh, Tess, and a row of women Maggie recognized but had never spoken to. Josiah stood in the back. He had chosen the back on purpose, Maggie knew. This was her moment, not his. Virgil Cobb sat in the second row. He was a lean man, well dressed for Silver Creek, with silver hair and pale blue eyes that looked like they had been washed clean of warmth. He smiled when Maggie walked to the front. It was the kind of smile that said, "I already won, and you just don't know it yet." Maggie's hands shook. She pressed them flat against her skirt. She looked out at the faces of people who had ignored her for 2 years. People who had closed their doors when she came asking for work. People who had looked away when Cobb's men tore down her fences. "My name is Margaret Ellison," she said. Her voice was thin at first, barely reaching the back of the room. "Most of you know me as the Ellison widow, the one with 5 children and the homestead on the creek." She took a breath. "My husband Robert died in the mine collapse 2 years ago. Since then, I have worked that land alone. I have raised my children alone, and I have fought to keep what is mine alone, because no one in this room offered to help." Silence. Some people shifted in their seats. Some looked at the floor. "I don't say that to shame you. I say it because you need to hear it. Because what happened to me is happening to others. The Petersons lost their ranch last spring. The Dawes family sold for pennies on the dollar. The Kim family was run out of town entirely. All of them pressured, all of them threatened, all of them by the same man." She looked at Cobb. He was still smiling. "Mr. Cobb has been buying up land along the creek to control the water rights. He uses intimidation, fraud, and the silence of good people to get what he wants. 3 weeks ago, he sent men to my property claiming I owed back taxes. It was a lie. Last week, the morning after a blizzard destroyed my roof, he sent men to offer me a price that wouldn't buy a saddle. My cabin wasn't cold yet, and he was already circling." The smile on Cobb's face flickered. "I am not going to sell my land. I am not going to be bullied or frightened or worn down. But I cannot fight this alone. None of us can. That is what Mr. Cobb is counting on. He is counting on us being too scared, too proud, or too divided to stand together." She looked at Ruth Dawson, who nodded once, firm and fierce. She looked at Doc Marsh, who raised his hand slightly. She looked at the faces in the crowd and saw something she had not expected. People were listening, really listening. "I am asking you to stop looking away. I am asking you to stand with me and with every family in this valley who has been threatened. Not because you owe me anything, but because this town is supposed to be a community, and a community protects its own." Cobb stood up. "This is touching, Mrs. Ellison, but you're making accusations without proof. I'm a businessman. I make fair offers for land. If people choose to sell, that's their right. Then you won't mind if the Territorial Land Office investigates those transactions." Maggie's voice was steady now. Rock steady. "Because I've written to them, and I've documented every threat, every lie, every visit from your men. So has Ruth Dawson. So have 3 other families." Cobb's smile died. For the first time, Maggie saw something behind it. Not anger. Fear. "You're bluffing." "Mr. Cobb, I walked 4 miles through a blizzard with 5 children and a baby with a 104-degree fever. I do not bluff." The room erupted. People stood. Voices rose. Ruth Dawson was on her feet, pointing at Cobb, listing grievances that went back years. Other voices joined in. The Peterson story. The Dawes story. Small injustices that had been swallowed in silence for too long, now pouring out like water through a broken dam. Cobb tried to speak. Nobody listened. He looked around the room and saw that the tide had turned, that the fear he had cultivated so carefully was breaking apart, and he walked out. He pushed through the crowd and walked out of the town hall and into the cold night, and Maggie watched him go. Josiah appeared beside her. He had not spoken during the meeting. He had not needed to. He stood next to her, and his shoulder touched hers, just barely. A point of contact that said everything without saying anything. "You did it," he said. "We'll see. Cobb's not finished." "No, but he's not the only one fighting now." People came to Maggie afterward. One by one, then in groups. Handshakes, nods, a few apologies. Mrs. Peters, who ran the general store, offered credit. Jim Hawley, who owned the feedlot, said he had 50 fence posts she could have at cost. Tom Littlebear, a Shoshone man who worked at the livery, told Maggie that her husband had once helped him when no one else would, and he was glad to return the favor. Maggie accepted each offer with a nod and a thank you, and each acceptance felt like letting go of something she had been gripping too tightly for too long. On the walk home, the children ran ahead. Rosie and Sam chased each other through the snow. Clara walked with Lily on her hip, singing softly. Hank walked beside Josiah, matching his stride, their breath making twin clouds in the cold air. Maggie walked behind them all and watched her family. Because that was what they were becoming, not replacing Robert. Nothing could replace Robert. But growing, the way a tree grows after a branch breaks. Not back to what it was, but into something new. Josiah slowed his pace until she caught up. They walked side by side in the dark, their shoulders almost touching. "Maggie?" "You said you weren't ready." "I remember." "Are you still not ready?" She listened to her children's voices ahead of them, bright and alive. She thought about Hank riding tall on a horse. She thought about Sam sitting on Tessa's lap. She thought about Lily sleeping safe while Josiah rocked her cot through the longest night of Maggie's life. She thought about Robert. She thought about the promise she had made at his grave. Keep them safe. Keep them alive. Build something good. "I'm getting closer," she said. Josiah nodded. They walked on together through the cold and the dark, not touching, not speaking, just two people moving in the same direction with the same quiet certainty that whatever was growing between them was strong enough to wait and real enough to last. At the cabin, the children went inside. Hank held the door for his siblings the way Josiah held doors, with the same unconscious courtesy. Maggie saw it. She saw everything. "Good night, Josiah." "Good night, Maggie." He started to turn. She caught his sleeve. He stopped. "That day in the blizzard, when you found us." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was ready to die. I had made peace with it. I was going to tell Clara to take the children, and I was going to lie down in the snow and stop fighting." Josiah's face went very still. "And then I heard your horse, and I thought, if God, or fate, or whatever, is sending a man through a blizzard to find me, then maybe I'm not supposed to give up yet. Maybe I'm supposed to keep getting up." She let go of his sleeve. "You didn't just save my children that day, Josiah. You saved me. And I don't say that because I needed rescuing. I say it because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is let someone help them." He stood there in the dark, hat in hand, and she saw his throat work. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Maggie Ellison, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known, and that includes the one whose picture I finally turned face up." She went inside. She closed the door. She pressed her back against it and breathed. In the darkness of the yard, Josiah Beckett stood with his hat in his hands and his heart wide open, and the Wyoming stars burning above him, and he let himself feel something he had not felt in 6 years. Hope. The Territorial Land Office sent an investigator in February. His name was Thomas Greer, a thin man with spectacles and a leather satchel full of documents, and he arrived on the morning stage looking like he had never seen snow in his life. Ruth Dawson met him at the station, took him straight to her boarding house, and fed him pot roast before he had even unpacked. By the end of his first week, Greer had interviewed 14 families. By the end of his second, he had subpoenaed Cobb's land records from the county clerk. Maggie sat in Ruth's parlor and watched the investigator spread papers across the table, his face getting tighter with every page he turned. "Mrs. Ellison, the pattern here is clear. Forged tax notices, fraudulent liens, witness intimidation." Greer looked up over his spectacles. "Mr. Cobb has been running what amounts to a criminal enterprise. The territorial governor will be very interested in this." "What happens now?" Maggie asked. "Now I go back to Cheyenne and file my report. Cobb's transactions will be reviewed. The families who were coerced into selling may have grounds to reclaim their land." He paused. "You should know that this process will take time. Months, possibly a year. And Mr. Cobb will not take it quietly. He hasn't taken anything quietly so far." Greer left on the Saturday stage. By Monday, Cobb's men had torn down 40 feet of Maggie's fence. She found it at dawn, the posts pulled clean out of the frozen ground, the wire coiled and thrown into the creek. Hank was with her. He stood looking at the damage with his fists clenched at his sides, shaking, not from cold. "I'll kill him," Hank said. "I swear to God, Mama, I'll kill that man." "You will not." Maggie grabbed her son's shoulders and turned him to face her. "Listen to me, Henry. Anger is a weapon. You can use it to build or you can use it to destroy, but you choose. Your father chose to build. Every single day of his life, he chose to build. You're going to do the same." "Papa's dead, Mama. Building didn't save him." The words hit her like a slap. She held onto his shoulders and looked into his eyes, Robert's eyes, full of rage and grief and the terrible knowledge that the world was not fair and never would be. "No," she said quietly. "Building didn't save him, but it saved us. Everything we have, this land, this cabin, you and your sisters and your brother, all of it exists because your father built it. Virgil Cobb can tear down every fence on this property, and it won't change that. You understand me?" Hank's chin trembled. He locked his jaw the way he always did, fighting it. But this time, the fight was too big, and the dam broke. He cried, 11 years old, and he cried the way he had not cried since the day they buried his father. Great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. Maggie pulled him against her, and held him, and let him break. Because sometimes, breaking is the only way to start healing. They rebuilt the fence. Josiah's men came without being asked, 4 of them showing up at sunrise the next morning with posts and wire and tools. William, the former Buffalo soldier, worked alongside Hank all day, teaching him how to set posts deep enough that no man could pull them out. "You set them 3 feet down," William told him. 3 feet into the earth. A man can tear down what's above ground, but he can't touch what's below. You remember that. Hank remembered. Cobb made one more move. In March, he filed a lawsuit claiming that Maggie's property lines were incorrectly surveyed, and that a portion of her land, the portion along the creek, actually belonged to his adjacent parcel. The suit was baseless, and everyone knew it, but it would cost money to fight, money Maggie did not have. Josiah found out on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, he had ridden to Cheyenne and hired a lawyer named Samuel Cross, a sharp-eyed man from Virginia who had fought land fraud cases across 3 territories. Josiah paid the retainer himself. When Maggie found out, she walked to his ranch in a fury. "You had no right!" Josiah was in the barn, brushing down his horse. He did not stop brushing. "You're welcome." "I told you from the beginning, I do not take charity. I do not accept gifts. I earn my way." "This isn't charity. It's strategy. Cobb's trying to bleed you dry with legal fees. If you can't afford a lawyer, he wins without ever going to trial. I'm not giving you anything. I'm protecting my own interests." "Your interests?" "Your land borders mine, Maggie. If Cobb takes your water rights, mine are next. Sam Cross isn't just your lawyer. He's mine, too. He finally stopped brushing and looked at her. I told you from the start. This is what allies do. She wanted to argue. She wanted to rage. She wanted to grab him by the shirt and shake him until he understood that she could not keep taking from him, because every time she took something, the walls between them got thinner, and the things she was not ready for got closer, and she was terrified of what would happen when there were no walls left. You are the most infuriating man I have ever known, she said. I've been told. Stop helping me. No. Josiah. Maggie. He set down the brush. He crossed the barn in 3 strides and stood in front of her, close enough that she could see the gray threading through his dark hair, close enough that she could smell leather and pine and cold air. I am not going to stop helping you. I am not going to stop standing with you. And I am not going to apologize for caring about you and your children. If that makes me infuriating, then I will be infuriating every day for the rest of my life. She stared at him. Her heart was hammering. Her hands were shaking. She was angry and grateful and scared, and something else. Something enormous that was pressing against the inside of her ribs like it was trying to get out. You promised me no strings, she whispered. That first night. You said no strings, no debt, no ownership. And I meant it. There are no strings. There is no debt. I don't own you, and I never will. His voice dropped low, rough at the edges. But I love you, Maggie. I've been trying not to say it because you asked me to wait, and I have waited, but I can't hold it anymore. I love you. I love your children. I love the way you fight and the way you laugh and the way you get up every single time you fall. I love that you walk through a blizzard for your baby, and I love that you stood up in front of this whole town and told the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Maggie's eyes burned. She pressed her hand against her mouth. I am not Robert, Josiah said. I will never try to be Robert. He was their father and your husband, and nothing changes that. But I am here, Maggie. I am standing right here, and I am asking you to let me love you. Not because you need me, because I need you. The barn was quiet. The horse shifted in its stall. Somewhere outside, Rosie's laughter floated in from the yard. I'm scared, Maggie said. Her voice cracked on the word. I am so scared, Josiah. Because last time I loved someone, I buried him. And I swore I would never go through that again. I swore I would never let another person have the power to destroy me like that. I know. And then you rode out of a blizzard, and you carried my baby, and you fed my children, and you taught my son how to sit a horse, and you turned your wife's picture face up, and I watched you do all of it, and I thought, this man is going to break my heart wide open, whether I let him or not. Josiah reached for her hand. She let him take it. His fingers closed around hers, rough and warm, and she felt the calluses and the strength and the steadiness that had held her upright in the snow. I can't promise I won't die, he said. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise you that every day I'm alive, I will choose you. I will choose your children. I will choose this family. And if God gives me 50 years or 5, I will spend every one of them making sure you know you are loved. Maggie looked at their joined hands, his, large and scarred and dark from the sun, hers, smaller, rough from work. The same hands that had bled in the snow, the same hands that had held her children through the worst night of their lives. She stepped forward and put her head against his chest. His arms came around her, careful at first, then tight, pulling her in, and she felt his heart beating fast, faster than she would have expected from a man who seemed so steady. Yes, she said into his shirt. Yes, Josiah. I'm done fighting this. He held her. He pressed his face into her hair, and she felt him shaking, and realized that Josiah Beckett, who had ridden through a blizzard without flinching, who had stared down Cobb's men without blinking, was trembling. "I have to talk to the children," she said. "I know. Hank might not take it well." "I know that too." She talked to them that evening, sitting at her kitchen table with all 5 of them. Lily on her lap, Sam beside her, Rosie across the table, Clara at the end, Hank leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "I need to tell you something important," Maggie said. "And I need you to listen before you say anything." "You're going to marry Mr. Beckett," Clara said. Maggie blinked. "How did you—" "Mama, I'm 13. I'm not blind." Clara's face was calm. "I've been watching you two for weeks. The way you look at each other when you think nobody's paying attention." "Are you all right with that?" Clara considered it. "He makes you smile, Mama. You didn't used to smile. And he's good to us. He's good to Hank, and he's gentle with Sam and Lily. And he treats me like a person, not like a kid. So yes, I'm all right with it." She paused. "Papa would want you to be happy." Maggie felt tears on her cheeks. She wiped them away. "I think it's wonderful." Rosie jumped up from her chair. "Does this mean Biscuit is our dog now? And we get to live at the ranch? Can I have my own horse?" "We'll talk about all of that later, Rosie." "Can I call him Papa?" The room went quiet. Maggie looked at Rosie, 8 years old, who barely remembered Robert, who had latched onto Josiah like a vine to a fence post, who needed a father, the way a plant needs light. "That's up to Mr. Beckett, baby. You'd have to ask him." Sam said nothing. He crawled into Maggie's lap next to Lily and put his thumb in his mouth, and Maggie held both of them and waited for the one voice that had not spoken. Hank stood against the wall. His jaw was working. His eyes were bright. He stared at the floor, at the ceiling, at his boots, at anywhere except his mother. "Hank," Maggie said softly, "talk to me." "Does this mean we forget about Papa?" "No, never. Your Papa is part of this family forever. Nothing changes that. He built this cabin. He built that fence. He worked the mine to feed us, and it killed him." Hank's voice was shaking. "And now some other man is just going to come in and— Josiah is not replacing your father, Henry. No one could ever replace your father." "Then what is he?" Maggie looked at her son, 11 years old, carrying the weight of a dead man's legacy on shoulders that were not yet wide enough for it. "He's the man who rode through a blizzard to save your sister. He's the man who taught you to ride and rope and break a colt. He's the man who stood between this family and Virgil Cobb without being asked." She kept her voice steady. "He's the man who loves your mother, Hank, and I love him." Hank's face crumpled, just for a second. Then he pulled it together, jaw tight, eyes hard, Robert's boy through and through. "If he hurts you, I'll—" "I know. You already told him." Hank looked up sharply. "He told you that?" "No, I heard you. That night at his house. I heard every word." Something shifted in Hank's expression. Surprise, then something softer. "What did he say? After I threatened him?" "He said if he ever hurt anyone in this family, he'd deserve it." Hank was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. Lily babbled. Sam's thumb made a soft, rhythmic sound. "All right," Hank said finally. "All right, Mama. But I'm watching him." "I'd expect nothing less." They were married in April, when the snow had melted enough to show green beneath it. The ceremony was at the community church in Silver Creek, the same church where Robert's funeral had been held, and Maggie felt him there. Not as a ghost, not as a haunting, as a presence that said, "Go, be happy. I am at peace." Tess stood beside Maggie. Ruth Dawson sat in the front row and cried without shame. Doc Marsh gave Maggie away because she had no father to do it, and the old doctor had been the closest thing to family she had found in Wyoming. Clara held Lily. Rosie threw wildflowers she had picked that morning. Sam held Hank's hand throughout the ceremony, and when the minister asked if anyone objected, Hank looked at Josiah with eyes that were Robert's eyes and said nothing, and that silence was his blessing. Josiah wore a dark suit that Tess had pressed 3 times. His hands shook when he took Maggie's. His voice shook when he said his vows. This man who could calm a wild horse with a whisper, who could ride through a killing storm without wavering, trembled when he promised to love a woman with 5 children and bleeding hands and a heart full of scars. I, Josiah Beckett, take you, Margaret Ellison, to be my wife. I promise to love you and your children. I promise to stand beside you in every storm. I promise that our home will be built on partnership and respect, and the love that chooses every single day to be enough. Maggie said her vows without crying. She made it all the way through. Then Josiah slipped the ring on her finger, and she looked at it. Simple gold, warm from his pocket. And she broke because the ring fit perfectly. The way the life they were building fit perfectly. Unexpected and unplanned, and absolutely right. The town came to the reception. All of Silver Creek, it seemed, crowded into Ruth Dawson's boarding house. People who had ignored Maggie for 2 years shook her hand and wished her well, and she let them, because holding grudges was a weight she could no longer afford to carry. Miguel played guitar. William sang in a deep baritone that made Tess cry. Jack danced with Rosie on his boots, the 2 of them laughing so hard they could barely stand. Maggie danced with Josiah. He was not a good dancer. He was stiff and careful and stepped on her feet twice, and she loved him for it, because it meant he was trying. Mrs. Beckett, he said, testing the name. Mr. Beckett. Sounds right. It does. He pulled her closer. They swayed more than danced, 2 people holding each other in the middle of a crowded room, and Maggie rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, the heartbeat that had been next to hers through the longest night of her life. Cobb's lawsuit was dismissed in June. Sam Cross tore it apart in court, presenting evidence of fraud and intimidation that left the judge speechless and Cobb's lawyers scrambling. The territorial governor launched a formal investigation. By August, 3 families had filed claims to recover their land. By October, Virgil Cobb had left Silver Creek. He sold his holdings at a loss and moved to Montana, and Maggie never saw him again. She did not celebrate. Cobb's departure was not a victory. It was the removal of a disease, necessary but not joyful. The real victory was what came after. Maggie opened a school, not on the ranch, but in Silver Creek proper, in a building that Ruth Dawson donated and Josiah's men renovated. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic to anyone who wanted to learn, children and adults alike. Miguel was her first adult graduate, standing in front of the class and reading a full page from a newspaper without stopping, tears running down his face while the children cheered. Hank grew. He worked the ranch beside Josiah, and somewhere in the daily rhythm of fences and cattle and horses, the boy stopped carrying the weight of his father's death and started carrying the weight of his own becoming. He never called Josiah Papa. He called him Joe, and Josiah never asked for more. But when Hank was 14 and won his first roping competition at the county fair, it was Josiah he looked for in the crowd. And the pride on Josiah's face was the pride of a father in every way that mattered. Clara became a teacher. She went east to school when she was 17 on money that Josiah had quietly set aside for 2 years, and came back to Wyoming with a certificate and a fire in her eyes that reminded Maggie of herself. Rosie never did get her own horse. She got 3. She became the best rider in the valley, training horses with the same instinct Josiah had, the gift of hands and patience, and a voice that animals trusted. She called Josiah Papa from the day of the wedding, and never stopped. Sam grew out of his shyness, slowly, the way dawn comes in winter, gradual and then all at once. It was Josiah who got through to him, not with words, but with presence. Josiah simply existed near Sam, day after day, never pushing, never demanding, until the boy's fear melted, and what remained was a quiet, deep bond that needed no explanation. Lily, who remembered nothing of the blizzard or the fever, grew up believing that Josiah Beckett had always been her father. And in every way that counted, he had. They had one more child together, a boy, born in the spring of 1883. They named him Robert Joseph Beckett. Robert for the man who built the cabin and the fence, and the family that made everything possible. Joseph for the man who rode through a storm to keep that family alive. When Maggie held her 6th child for the first time, she looked at Josiah and saw in his eyes the thing he had wanted for 6 years, the thing he had given up hoping for, the thing that a woman with bleeding hands and 5 children had given back to him without even knowing it. A family. Years passed the way years do in Wyoming, measured in seasons and storms and the slow, steady work of building something that lasts. The ranch prospered, the school grew, the children became adults with children of their own, and through all of it, through the drought years and the hard winters, through the losses and the celebrations, through the ordinary days that were extraordinary because they were shared, Maggie and Josiah chose each other. Every morning, every evening, every moment between. On their 20th anniversary, they sat on the porch of the ranch house, the same porch where Maggie had first arrived with 5 frozen children and a dying baby. The house was bigger now, rooms added for each child, a wing for Maggie's library. Josiah's yellow dog was long gone, but there was a new dog and a new litter of pups that Rosie was training. Josiah? Do you remember what you said to me in the barn, when you told me you loved me? I remember every word. You said you needed me, not that I needed you. You said you needed me. I did. I meant it. That's why I said yes. She took his hand. Every man I'd ever known told me what I needed. My father told me I needed security. Robert, God rest him, told me I needed a home. Virgil Cobb told me I needed to sell. But you were the first man who ever stood in front of me and said you needed me. Not what I could give you, not what I could do for you. Me. Josiah lifted her hand to his lips, the way he did every evening, a habit so old it was part of him. I rode into that blizzard because I saw your chimney smoke was wrong, he said. But that's not the whole truth. I rode into that blizzard because I had been watching your chimney smoke every morning for 2 years. Every morning, Maggie. I looked south toward your homestead, and I watched your smoke, and I told myself it was nothing, that I was just checking on a neighbor. But every morning that smoke was there, I felt something I had not felt since Ellen died. What? A reason to get up. Maggie leaned her head on his shoulder. The Wyoming sky was enormous above them, streaked with the colors of a sunset that would be gone in minutes, but would repeat tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, reliable as the love of a man who kept every promise he ever made. You asked me once if I was ready, she said. That night on the road, after the town meeting. You said you were getting closer. I was wrong. I was already there. I was there from the moment you carried Lily through the snow. I just needed time to stop being afraid of it. Was it worth the wait? She thought about her children, about Clara teaching school in the building Ruth Dawson donated. About Hank riding the ranch he would one day inherit. About Rosie breaking horses and laughing. About Sam, quiet and strong, studying law in Cheyenne. About Lily, who would never know how close she came to dying in a blizzard, but who would grow up knowing she was loved beyond measure. About little Robert, asleep inside, dreaming the dreams of a boy who had never known a world without both his parents in it. "Every second," she said. "Every single second." They sat together as the light faded, two people who had found each other in the worst storm of their lives, and built something that no winter could touch. Not a perfect life. No life is perfect. But a real one, built on the things that matter. Courage and patience, and the willingness to show up, day after day, for the people you love. Maggie closed her eyes. She listened to the wind, the cattle, the sound of her children's voices inside the house. She felt Josiah's heartbeat through his shirt, steady as the day she first leaned against him in the snow. She had walked into a blizzard, ready to die. A man on a horse had found her and carried her home. And she had spent every day since then learning the hardest lesson of her life. That strength is not refusing help. Strength is letting someone love you when everything in you screams to keep your walls up. She let them down. And behind those walls was not weakness. Behind those walls was the rest of her life. Josiah squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. The same silent language they had spoken for 20 years. The language of two people who chose each other in a storm and kept choosing. Through every season, through every year, through every ordinary, extraordinary day. The wind picked up. The first stars appeared. And Maggie Beckett, who had once been a widow with bleeding hands and 5 children, and nothing but her own stubborn will to keep her standing, sat on the porch of the home she had built with the man she loved and knew, with a certainty as deep as fence posts set 3 feet in the earth, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because a cowboy saved her, because she let him. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this story. Maggie's journey through the storm, through loss, through the cold has been one of grit and survival. But, as we've seen, the real strength wasn't in her ability to stand alone. It was in the moments she allowed herself to lean on someone else, to trust that she didn't have to carry the weight of the world by herself. We often forget that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply ask for help, to allow others to hold us up when we feel like we can't stand on our own anymore. Her story isn't just about fighting for survival, but about finding grace and love where you least expect it, sometimes in the most unlikely of places. From the most unexpected of people, it's a reminder that courage is not just about facing the storm head-on, but about knowing when to let others walk beside you, to share in the fight. And so, as we close tonight, I invite you to reflect on the quiet strength that lives inside all of us, the strength to endure, to hope, and to open our hearts to those who choose to walk with us. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create space for connection. And sometimes, that's where the healing truly begins. Remember, in the darkest of times, it's not just about holding on. It's about knowing that, no matter the storm, you don't have to face it alone. Good night. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this story. Maggie's journey through the storm, through loss, through the cold has been one of grit and survival. But, as we've seen, the real strength wasn't in her ability to stand alone. It was in the moments she allowed herself to lean on someone else, to trust that she didn't have to carry the weight of the world by herself. We often forget that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply ask for help, to allow others to hold us up when we feel like we can't stand on our own anymore. Her story isn't just about fighting for survival, but about finding grace and love where you least expect it, sometimes in the most unlikely of places. From the most unexpected of people, it's a reminder that courage is not just about facing the storm head-on, but about knowing when to let others walk beside you, to share in the fight. And so, as we close tonight, I invite you to reflect on the quiet strength that lives inside all of us, the strength to endure, to hope, and to open our hearts to those who choose to walk with us. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create space for connection. And sometimes, that's where the healing truly begins. Remember, in the darkest of times, it's not just about holding on. It's about knowing that, no matter the storm, you don't have to face it alone. Good night.